As this deep exploration continues, one of the most revealing truths about how women think is how strongly their minds are shaped by emotional memory rather than isolated facts. Women often remember experiences through the emotional atmosphere surrounding them, the tone of a voice, the feeling of being supported or dismissed, the sense of closeness or distance in a moment. These emotional imprints become reference points that guide future thinking and decision-making. When a woman reacts strongly to something that appears small, it is often because her mind has connected it to a larger emotional pattern stored over time. This does not mean women live in the past. It means their thinking honors experience as a source of wisdom. Another powerful aspect of women's thinking is how they manage inner dialogue. Women often carry rich internal conversations with themselves, reflecting, questioning, reassuring, and sometimes challenging their own thoughts. This inner dialogue helps them process complexity and regulate emotions, but it can also make their thinking appear invisible to others. While silence may be mistaken for passivity, women are often deeply engaged mentally, weighing perspectives and meanings. Their minds are rarely idle. They are continuously synthesizing information in ways that are subtle but profound. Women's thinking also shows a unique relationship with trust. Trust is not granted quickly or blindly. It is built through consistency, emotional availability, and mutual respect. Women tend to think of trust as something that grows through repeated experiences rather than declarations or promises. Once trust is established, women often invest deeply, both emotionally and mentally. When people talk about how women think, they often rely on stereotypes or surface-level observations, but the reality is far more complex, nuanced, and fascinating. One of the most mind-blowing facts about women's thinking is how deeply contextual it tends to be. Women are more likely to process information by linking it to relationships, past experiences, emotional cues, and social meaning rather than isolating facts on their own. This does not mean logic is absent. Rather, logic is woven together with emotion and intuition in a way that creates a broader understanding of situations. For many women, a decision is rarely just about the present moment. It carries echoes of previous interactions, unspoken expectations, and future consequences. This integrated style of thinking allows women to anticipate reactions, sense underlying tensions, and pick up on subtle shifts in behavior that others might overlook. It is why women often seem to just know when something feels off, even when there is no obvious evidence on the surface. Another striking aspect of how women think lies in emotional intelligence. Women's minds are often finely tuned to emotional signals, both their own and those of others. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is a cognitive strength that enables deeper empathy and social awareness. Women tend to analyze emotions rather than dismiss them, asking what a feeling means, where it comes from, and how it might influence behavior. When a woman reflects on an emotional experience, her brain is often engaging in complex pattern recognition, connecting feelings to causes, meanings, and potential outcomes. This is why women may replay conversations in their minds, not to overthink unnecessarily, but to extract insight, understand intentions, and refine future responses. Emotional processing for women is often a way of learning, adapting, and protecting social harmony. Women also tend to think in narratives rather than isolated events. Experiences are stored and remembered as stories with characters, emotions, and moral lessons. This narrative thinking allows women to see continuity in life, to understand how one moment leads to another, and to interpret behavior within a broader storyline. Because of this, women are often highly reflective. They think about how relationships evolve, how people change over time, and how their own identity is shaped through interaction. This reflective tendency explains why women often seek meaning rather than just resolution. Solving a problem is important, but understanding why it happened and what it says about the people involved can matter even more. One of the most misunderstood facts about how women think is their relationship with communication. Women often think through talking, not after thinking. Verbal expression is frequently part of the cognitive process itself. Speaking allows thoughts to take shape, emotions to become clearer, and ideas to organize themselves. When women talk about a problem, they are not always seeking immediate solutions. They are often seeking clarity, validation, and shared understanding. This is why listening is so powerful in conversations with women. Being heard helps them refine their own thoughts and feel emotionally safe enough to explore them fully. Silence, dismissal, or premature advice can interrupt this thinking process and feel deeply unsatisfying. Women's thinking is also heavily influenced by social awareness. From an early age, many women become skilled at reading social environments, adjusting their behavior, and understanding group dynamics. This does not mean women lack individuality. Rather, their minds are often trained to balance personal needs with collective well-being. Women frequently consider how their actions will affect others, how words might be interpreted, and how harmony can be maintained without sacrificing authenticity. This mental balancing act requires significant cognitive effort and explains why women can feel mentally exhausted even after seemingly simple social interactions. Their minds are constantly scanning for emotional signals, power dynamics, and unspoken rules. Another mind-blowing aspect is how women handle uncertainty. While they may appear anxious or cautious at times, this often reflects a deep awareness of complexity rather than fear. Women are more likely to consider multiple possible outcomes simultaneously, holding different scenarios in mind at once. This type of thinking can look like hesitation, but it is actually advanced risk assessment. Women often ask, what if, not to avoid action, but to prepare emotionally and strategically. This ability to tolerate ambiguity allows women to adapt quickly when circumstances change, even if the initial decision-making process takes longer. Women's memory systems also play a fascinating role in how they think. Emotional memories tend to be more vivid and detailed, especially when tied to relationships or meaningful experiences. This means women often remember how something felt long after the exact words or facts have faded. These emotional memories guide future thinking, influencing trust, caution, attachment, and boundaries. When a woman reacts strongly to a situation that seems minor to others, it is often because her mind has connected it to a deeper emotional memory that carries significance beyond the present moment. Perhaps one of the most powerful facts about how women think is their capacity for mental resilience. Women often carry multiple mental roles at once: professional responsibilities, emotional labor, relational awareness, and self-reflection, all running in parallel. Their minds are frequently occupied with planning, caring, anticipating, and supporting, even when they appear calm on the outside. This constant cognitive multitasking builds a unique form of strength. Women may internalize stress more, but they also develop remarkable endurance, adaptability, and psychological insight through lived experience. Finally, how women think is deeply shaped by meaning and purpose. Many women are driven not only by achievement, but by alignment, whether their actions reflect their values, relationships, and sense of self. Their thinking often returns to questions of authenticity, connection, and impact. This is why women can feel deeply unfulfilled by success that lacks emotional or moral significance. For them, a meaningful life is not just about what is accomplished, but how it feels, who it affects, and whether it resonates with their inner truth. Understanding how women think, then, is not about decoding a mystery, but about appreciating a richly layered, emotionally intelligent, and profoundly human way of engaging with the world. As the exploration of how women think continues, one of the most fascinating realities is how deeply women value internal consistency. Women often feel psychological discomfort when their actions, words, or relationships do not align with their inner values. This is why many women spend a great deal of mental energy reflecting on whether something feels right, rather than merely whether it works. Their thinking constantly checks for emotional and moral alignment, and when something violates that alignment, it lingers in the mind. This internal dialogue is not indecision. It is an effort to live authentically. Women tend to question themselves deeply, replaying moments not because they doubt their intelligence, but because they care about integrity, about being fair, kind, honest, and true to themselves and others. When a woman says she has a gut feeling, it is rarely random. Her brain has detected patterns, tone of voice, facial microexpressions, inconsistencies in behavior that have not yet been consciously articulated. This intuitive processing allows women to make remarkably accurate social judgments, particularly in situations involving trust, safety, or emotional risk. Society often undervalues intuition, yet for women, it functions as a sophisticated cognitive shortcut informed by deep perception. Women also tend to experience time differently in their thinking. Past, present, and future are often mentally connected rather than sharply separated. A current situation may activate memories of past experiences and projections of future consequences all at once. This layered sense of time explains why women may respond emotionally to situations that others see as isolated events. Their minds are not focused on a single moment, but on the continuity of experience. This makes women particularly sensitive to repeated patterns of behavior. One incident may be forgivable, but repeated emotional signals form a story, and once that story becomes clear, women's thinking often shifts decisively. Another overlooked aspect of women's thinking is the mental energy they invest in emotional labor. Women frequently think about how to maintain emotional balance in relationships, how to support others, avoid conflict, and ensure that people feel valued and understood. This constant emotional monitoring is mentally taxing, yet largely invisible. Women often anticipate needs before they are expressed, adjust their tone to prevent discomfort, and absorb emotional tension to keep situations stable. Over time, this can lead to mental fatigue, but it also develops extraordinary interpersonal intelligence. Women become skilled at navigating complexity, mediating conflict, and sustaining relationships through difficult emotional terrain. Women's thinking also shows a unique relationship with vulnerability. While vulnerability is often framed as weakness, women frequently view it as a form of strength and connection. Their minds are more open to acknowledging fear, sadness, or uncertainty, not as failures, but as valid human experiences. This openness allows women to process emotions more fully rather than suppress them. By thinking through vulnerability, women often gain deeper self-awareness and emotional maturity. However, when vulnerability is dismissed or exploited, it can profoundly affect women's thinking, leading to guardedness and emotional withdrawal. Another powerful fact about how women think is their sensitivity to fairness and reciprocity. Women often mentally track emotional balance in relationships: who gives, who listens, who supports, and who withdraws. When this balance feels consistently unequal, it creates cognitive and emotional strain. Women may tolerate imbalance for a long time, especially when they care deeply, but their minds do not forget it. Eventually, this awareness shapes decisions about boundaries, distance, or change. This is why women's withdrawal from relationships can seem sudden to others, even though it is usually the result of long-term internal processing. Women also think deeply about identity and self-concept. They often ask themselves who they are becoming through their choices and relationships. Their thinking is not only about outcomes, but about transformation. A job, a relationship, or a life decision is evaluated not just for success, but for how it shapes character, confidence, and emotional well-being. This identity-focused thinking makes women particularly sensitive to environments that invalidate or diminish them. When a situation consistently undermines their sense of self, their minds begin to detach long before any outward change occurs. As the thinking journey goes even deeper, one of the most powerful realities about how women think is how closely their cognition is tied to emotional safety. When women feel emotionally secure, understood, and respected, their thinking becomes clearer, more creative, and more confident. Emotional safety allows women to express ideas freely, take risks, and explore possibilities without fear of judgment. On the other hand, when emotional safety is threatened, women's minds instinctively shift into protective mode. They may become quieter, more cautious, or more observant. This is not emotional instability. It is an adaptive response. Women's thinking is highly responsive to their environment, and subtle emotional cues can either unlock their full intellectual potential or quietly shut it down. Another deeply misunderstood aspect of women's thinking is how they process conflict. Women rarely see conflict as just disagreement. They often experience it as a signal about the health of a relationship. Their minds instinctively ask what the conflict means, what it reveals, and whether it threatens connection or trust. Because of this, women may appear more emotionally affected by arguments, even when the issue itself seems small. For them, conflict carries symbolic weight. It represents patterns, respect, care, and emotional availability. Women often think about conflict long after it ends, not because they enjoy dwelling on negativity, but because they seek resolution at a deeper level, emotional closure, understanding, and reassurance that the relationship remains intact. Women also demonstrate a remarkable capacity for anticipatory thinking. Their minds are often running simulations of the future, imagining how present actions may unfold emotionally and socially over time. This forward-looking cognition helps women prepare mentally and emotionally for potential challenges. They think not only about what might happen, but about how it would feel and how they would cope. This mental rehearsal builds emotional readiness and resilience. While it can sometimes look like worry, it is often a form of quiet preparation that allows women to remain composed when unexpected events actually occur. Another mind-blowing truth lies in how women think about attachment. Women's minds are deeply influenced by connection, bonding, and relational continuity. They tend to remember not just what someone did, but how consistently they showed up over time. Reliability, emotional presence, and small repeated behaviors leave a stronger imprint than grand gestures. Women's thinking tracks patterns of care, effort, and emotional investment, and these patterns gradually shape trust. When trust is broken, it is not a single act that hurts most, but the disruption of the mental model women have built about safety and reliability. Women's thinking also reveals a strong inclination towards self-improvement and emotional growth. Many women constantly reflect on how they can communicate better, love more wisely, and respond more thoughtfully. Their minds revisit experiences as opportunities for learning rather than as closed chapters. This reflective habit helps women evolve emotionally, but it can also make them overly self-critical when they internalize blame for things beyond their control. Women often ask themselves what they could have done differently, even in situations where responsibility is shared. This tendency reflects accountability and depth, but it also explains why women benefit greatly from validation and reassurance. Another profound aspect of how women think is their sensitivity to inconsistency. When words and actions do not match, women notice. Their minds pick up on contradictions between tone, behavior, and intention. Inconsistency creates cognitive dissonance that women find difficult to ignore. Over time, repeated inconsistencies erode trust and emotional investment. Women may not always confront these issues immediately, but their thinking quietly adjusts. Emotional distance often begins internally long before it becomes visible externally. Women's thinking is also deeply influenced by meaning-making during hardship. When facing pain, loss, or disappointment, women often search for meaning rather than denial. Their minds ask what the experience teaches, how it reshapes values, and how it contributes to personal strength. This meaning-oriented thinking allows women to transform suffering into wisdom. It is one of the reasons women often emerge from adversity with heightened empathy, clarity, and emotional intelligence. Perhaps one of the most extraordinary truths about how women think is their ability to hold emotional complexity without collapsing into extremes. Women can love deeply while acknowledging flaws, feel sadness while remaining strong, and experience fear while continuing forward. Their thinking allows contradictory emotions to coexist. This emotional flexibility enables women to navigate life with nuance rather than rigid judgments. They understand that people are layered, situations are rarely simple, and growth often comes through discomfort. In the end, understanding how women think requires moving beyond simplistic explanations. Women's minds are constantly integrating emotion, logic, memory, intuition, identity, and purpose into a living, evolving framework. This way of thinking is not chaotic. It is adaptive, relational, and profoundly intelligent. When women are listened to, respected, and emotionally supported, their thinking becomes a powerful force for insight, connection, and transformation, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of everyone around them. However, when trust is broken, the impact on their thinking can be significant. It forces their minds to reassess assumptions, reinterpret memories, and rebuild emotional boundaries. This rebuilding process takes time because it involves restructuring the internal narrative they had created about safety and connection. Another mind-blowing reality is how women think about responsibility. Women often take emotional responsibility not only for themselves but for others around them. Their minds may constantly consider how their actions affect loved ones, colleagues, or family members. This sense of responsibility can be empowering, but it can also lead women to carry burdens that are not entirely theirs. Women may internalize guilt even when circumstances are beyond their control, reflecting a deeply ingrained tendency toward care and accountability. Women's thinking is also deeply connected to creativity. Emotional depth, imagination, and intuition often work together to produce original ideas, solutions, and expressions. Women's minds frequently draw inspiration from lived experience, transforming emotion into insight. This is why women often excel in roles that require innovation, empathy, and adaptability. Their thinking allows them to see possibilities where others see limitations, especially in human-centered challenges. Another subtle but important aspect of women's thinking is how they approach endings and transitions. Women rarely detach abruptly. Their minds take time to process closure, whether it involves a relationship, a role, or a life phase. They reflect on what was learned, what was lost, and what remains unresolved. This gradual mental transition allows women to let go with understanding rather than denial. While it may look like lingering attachment, it is often a thoughtful and healthy form of emotional integration. Women also tend to think deeply about self-worth and validation. External feedback, especially from close relationships, can strongly influence their internal narrative. When women feel appreciated, seen, and valued, their confidence grows organically. When appreciation is absent or inconsistent, self-doubt can quietly take root. This sensitivity does not indicate fragility. It reflects how relational feedback is woven into women's sense of identity. Their minds use connection as a mirror through which they understand themselves. Perhaps one of the most extraordinary dimensions of how women think is their ability to endure emotional complexity without losing compassion. Even after disappointment or hurt, many women retain the capacity to understand others' perspectives and motivations. Their thinking often balances self-protection with empathy, allowing them to forgive without forgetting, to care without surrendering boundaries. This balance is difficult and requires immense psychological strength. Ultimately, how women think cannot be reduced to simple traits or labels. Their minds operate as dynamic systems shaped by emotion, memory, intuition, reflection, and meaning. This complexity enables women to navigate relationships, challenges, and life transitions with depth and resilience. When their way of thinking is acknowledged and respected, it becomes clear that women's cognition is not only powerful, but essential to the emotional and social fabric of human life.